Dear listener, I just want to let you know there are new products right now at the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store. I really do think you will love these items that I have designed. That's right, yours truly, Omar Moore here, to tell you about some brand new items of merchandise available at the Politicrat Daily Podcast store. Some new items. There's a lovely t-shirt, the Lava Life and Podcast Life. Now, you might think those things aren't connected, but when you think about it, the sound of someone's voice sonorously in your ear as you sit and listen, or stand and listen, or walk and listen, or sleep and listen to your podcast, to this podcast. And I think you'll like these t-shirts. And there's some other ones on the way too. Oh my gosh. Wait till you see some of the other stuff that I've got lined up for you at the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Dear listener, I should tell you that Earl Simmons, better known to the world as DMX, the rapper, has passed away at the age of 50. His family made an announcement today, and my deepest condolences go to the family members of DMX. Earl Simmons, rest in power. Very sad news there. DMX, the rapper, had been in cardiac arrest. He had suffered a catastrophic cardiac arrest, and he'd been on life support for a number of days, and it did not look good for him, and it was really bad. It was really bad for him. He passed away surrounded by family members, and it's very sad. He was just 50 years of age. Just 50 years of age. We've already lost this week someone who was even younger than he, Midwin Charles. And we've lost Alcee Hastings, who lived a considerably longer life. And DMX was someone who had his ups and his downs, his struggles, but was a compelling artist and someone who also was an entrepreneur and was trying to get himself past some of the really difficult things and try to overcome some of the more challenging parts of life. And unfortunately, he suffered a cardiac arrest a few days ago and had been in hospital ever since in a really serious and bad way. He passed away today. It's very sad news. Rest in power, Earl Simmons. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, April the 9th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, a look at the trial of Derek Chauvin, the murder trial, on day number 10. Yesterday was a really good day for the prosecution.
It was with great sadness that a short time ago I received word from Buckingham Palace that His Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, has passed away at the age of 99. Prince Philip earned the affection of generations here in the United Kingdom, across the Commonwealth, and around the world. He was the longest-serving consort in history, one of the last surviving people in this country to have served in the Second World War, at Cape Matapan, where he was mentioned in dispatches for bravery, and in the invasion of Sicily, where he saved his ship by his quick thinking. And from that conflict, he took an ethic of service that he applied throughout the unprecedented changes of the post-war era.
That was UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson earlier today, standing outside of 10 Downing Street in London, announcing the passing of Prince Philip of the British royal family. He was 99 years of age, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and he had some health issues over the last few years. Most recently, he was released from hospital within the last, 3 weeks or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, and he appeared to be on the mend. Certainly did not look the best, but appeared to be healthier and was resting back at Windsor Castle. He passed away, as announced there by Boris Johnson. He got word from Buckingham Palace, and they had actually sent out a tweet earlier today. It is from the royal family's Twitter account at Royal Family. And this was the tweet they sent out today. It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen has announced the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. So there you have it, Prince Philip passing away today at the age of 99. A robustly long life, and a life of service, a life of service for country as well as for people in his capacity as a royal family member. Yes, definitely there are issues in the background for Prince Philip and his family, particularly on his family, his siblings. Oh my goodness me, entangled with Nazis. I mean, three of his siblings were Nazis. I mean, they married into Nazism, became Nazis essentially. And yes, there's photos online of Prince Philip himself, I think as a teenager, back in the 30s or whenever, but he was a teenager, and he was attending actually a funeral. I think it was the funeral of one of his sisters. And it was a Nazi funeral in Germany, Nazi Germany. It was a funeral, and you saw the swastikas and the this and the that and the other, and the Nazi salutes and all of that when he was a teenager. So, but no evidence that I know of that he actually himself was a Nazi. I don't think that's true at all. Anybody that's telling you that would be lying to you, would not be giving you accurate information. But there's no doubt that his family were connected. Certainly his sisters and brother, I think, whomever, definitely, excuse me, at least two of his sisters. So yeah, definitely issues there. But look, I shouldn't say but. I can't say but after that, can you? I should say that at this time, I do want to acknowledge his passing. He was 99 years of age, a stalwart there. He was always there for the Queen. And no matter what I think of the royal family, the fact is that this is a pretty darn big loss for them, losing the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. So I just want to say my condolences to the family there, to the royal family. And certainly that's a tremendous loss. Prince Charles, his father, and obviously Queen Elizabeth II's husband. They had been together for over 60 years or thereabouts, maybe even longer than that. So they had probably more longer than that. So I'd say probably maybe 70 years. They've been together a long time. And as I said, he was a constant, and he served his country with distinction. There's something to be said for that. You've got to give that credit, because that's somebody who cares about the country he is serving. He had many decades of distinguished service as a member of the royal family. So there you go. I definitely pass my condolences to the family of Windsor, if you will, to the Queen, to the royal family overall, for this loss today. Prince Philip passing away today at the age of 99. So, I'm actually going to put a link up, and it's going to be in the newsletter for this episode, Friday, April 9th, 2021. The newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free, Free, at politicrat.substack.com. That's politicrat.substack.com. Substack. Politicrat.substack.com. And I'm going to have a story in that newsletter that talks about, and it's from the Daily Express of all places, one of the more conservative, or I should say rather right-wing newspapers, because I actually think there's a difference. And there can be a difference between those two terms, right-wing and conservative. But I do want to, and I will, and that newsletter will be coming later, at the later end of the evening. If not, hopefully, well, maybe a little bit earlier, we'll see. Depends on a number of things. But the newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free right now, Free, please subscribe to it. It's great that people are, and definitely would love for you to be one of them as well, please. So go right now to politicrat.substack.com. Lots of items and news that I either may discuss on this episode or any episode, or may not get to. And there's some extras. There's some helpful hints and links, rather, and information for you in the US or beyond, but links that you may not have had a chance to look at, you may be unaware of. Links to government agencies, links to information that you, I think, could use, that could be very helpful for you. And all kinds of other assorted things, audio that I do on the newsletters that you will not hear on these episodes, extras, and a lot of other things too. Unveiling of new merchandise, etc., etc., etc. Links to other websites that you will find, I think, to be edifying and helpful. So please, this is a newsletter that has got some good information in it, things that you may not be aware of, some news stories that you may not be aware of in places around the world, that you may not have heard of in the news sources that you consult. And, I will write some essays sometimes, I'll write some observations and comments, and those won't be anywhere else. And I write in a number of platforms, but the things that I link to or that I write about in the newsletter will not be found anywhere else, unless I've linked to it from my own pre-existing blog or anything like that. So please subscribe. I know I've said that 2 or 3 times, but please do go to politicrat.substack.com. Free of charge, Free. And I hope you enjoy it. And I really do appreciate you subscribing. And I will be including this story from the Daily Express, about Prince Philip and the Nazis. And it's kind of, he's not, again, I want to make this clear, Prince Philip was not a Nazi. Now, he is German. He was German. He was born in Corfu. He has a Germanic family name, but he is not someone who was a Nazi, okay? So I know I'm bringing this up on, some people would say, how dare you even talk about this? He's passed away today. Have some respect, man. I have issued my condolences, and I am sorry to hear that he passed. I'm sorry to hear that he passed. His family name is Schleswig-Holstein, Sonderburg-Glücksburg. So, he was only 16 when he attended the funeral in Nazi Germany of his elder sister. He was only 16 years old in 1937. So, and he wasn't, and in the photos that you do see, he's not wearing any Nazi paraphernalia. I know Prince Harry, remember, famously did that years ago at a fancy dress party for Halloween years ago. He dressed up as and the backlash he got, oh gosh. Can you imagine? He has definitely changed since then. And, he's got a black wife. He has a woman who is black, who is his wife. So I would hope that he's changed. I think he has changed a lot more than that royal family has, obviously. But yeah, there's no question about it. And it's and I want to make a correction. He had 4 sisters, Prince Philip. Prince Philip had 4 sisters. I mentioned a brother, but that's incorrect. He had 4 sisters. He may have had a brother. I'm not aware that he has a brother, but I did misspeak there earlier, and I apologize. 4 sisters. And yeah, 3 of these sisters became Nazis, or they were tied to the Nazis. Married into Nazism, if you will, for lack of a better word. So, he was not a Nazi. I want to make that clear. He just had a lot of relatives, or a sizable number of siblings, who were Nazis, or who married into that and became Nazis themselves. So that's what I want to make clear. And again, excuse me for belaboring the point here. He attended, which is, this is not belaboring it. I shouldn't, you see, I've got to really be careful with what I'm saying. And I mean that for myself, not for anyone else. He did attend a funeral in Nazi Germany as a 16-year-old. So in 1937, which of course was during World War One, right? I mean, World War II, excuse me. My gosh, World War II. Good grief. World War II, right? I mean, or during the time, certainly was around that time, and certainly Nazi Germany was going on and on. It started, in the earlier 1930s. Hitler rose to power in 33, 34, 32, 33, around there. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But in any event, it was during that time. So it was full-on Nazi Germany. And Prince Philip attended the funeral of his sister there. His elder sister, Cecile, actually, to be precise. And yes, there were people there in SS and brown shirt uniforms. That is not going to be talked about today in the remembrances of Prince Philip. But I mentioned it. You probably will not find it in very many other places, unless you're you won't find that on Sky News today. You won't find that, and you didn't find that on Sky News today. You won't find that, and didn't find it, most certainly. You didn't find it on the BBC today. You didn't find it on Channel 4 today, ITV, or anywhere else. In the UK, at least that's prominent. You may find it in blogs, and you may find it in media that is not as prominent, but you certainly will not find it today on any of those more prominent networks and corporate news stations and things. But again, I have now talked about this now for nearly 10 minutes, so if not longer, so more than 10 minutes. So there you go. That was the news earlier today. Prince Philip has passed at the age of 99. It's interesting that Jeremy Corbyn, apparently, the former Labour leader, who now is no longer has the parliamentary whip. So that means he cannot, and I've mentioned this before to you, dear listener, he cannot participate any longer in House of Commons sessions as a member of the Labour Party as they vote on things. So he cannot vote in the House of Commons in Parliament as a Labour member. Now, he is actually a member of the Labour Party, but in terms of the operational sense of the party, when it is convening in Parliament in the House of Commons, he cannot participate as a Labour member. He does not have any power or authority or any kind of backing to vote as a Labour member. So what Jeremy Corbyn is when he is in Parliament is an independent. And his vote goes down as an independent vote. It is not a vote recorded by the party. So because the parliamentary whip had been removed from him earlier this year, I think it was it this year or last? These things just bleed into each other now. It could have been last year, actually. Could have been October or November of last year. So I think it was. So October or November of last year, Jeremy Corbyn had the whip removed by Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer is the current Labour leader. And we are now, would you believe, that those of you who aren't... I mentioned all of this. Let me just say why I mentioned this. I mention this because today Jeremy Corbyn was scolded on social media for not tweeting out initially at least, not tweeting out condolences to the royal family on the passing of Prince Philip. So I do want to say that's why I mentioned it, and I've gone on now about this, but I do want to just talk about this for a quick second. So he got lambasted because he apparently had posted something about when this had been known about Prince Philip's passing, and it's been known now, by the time you listen to this, it's going to be many hours. But it's been known for hours now. At the time I'm recording this, it's been known for a few hours that he passed away. And Prince Philip has passed away. And Jeremy Corbyn, for hours, hadn't posted anything about the passing of Prince Philip. And so the former Labour leader instead had tweeted out something about Bolivia and about independence, I believe, and about the left and about this and about that and the other. And here's this forum that I'm attending or people are attending, etc., and come join us in solidarity. And he got lambasted. He got absolutely raked over the coals. And many people who raked him over the coals on social media, on Twitter, saw it as a very insensitive thing that he would not even acknowledge the passing of Prince Philip and instead talk about a victory for the left and talk about Bolivia as if nothing had happened. And so within a few hours, he changed his tune, deleted the tweet about Bolivia. Jeremy Corbyn, dear. I know that he's had a long history of fighting the right fights in terms of standing up against racism and that legacy that he's had to a degree, but he's anti-Semitic. He's anti-Semitic though, That's not exactly standing up for racism. That is racism, isn't it? Come on now. Let's call this honestly. And dear listener, I'm not going to steer you wrong. I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to pretend. I'll call myself out if I do something or when I do something that's wrong. Or I hope you'll call me out. So, yeah, Jeremy Corbyn, he has this history of all of this. The way he behaved about when it came down to the issues that the Labour Party had and still does have, but not as much now under Sir Keir Starmer, but it's still a problem, anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and it's also in the Conservative Party. It's everywhere. Anti-Semitism is evil, and it must be eradicated from this planet. It must. And, Jeremy Corbyn his whole blasé approach last year around, this report is really overstating things about, not a good look. And that's why he got the whip removed from him by Sir Keir Starmer, whose whole campaign in April of last year, April 9th, in fact, this is exactly a year, I think. A year to the day that he released a statement on video, it was 9 minutes long, where he talked about, Sir Keir Starmer did, as the new Labour leader, I pledge to eradicate anti-Semitism from this party and regain the trust of the Jewish community. He said that. In fact, I think it was exactly a year ago, April 9th of 2020. And I think it was on a Saturday or thereabouts. And it would have been, I think. And I remember because I saw the video, I watched the whole video. I should actually try to dial that up and see if I can, and I'll dial that up. I'll probably put that into the, maybe I will. Maybe that'll make its way into the newsletter as well. But the point is that Jeremy Corbyn has been a real blasé about some of this. And it's not a good look. And then whatever you might think about the royal family, some people love the royal family. In England, I would say it's probably about 60-40 in favor of the royals. Someone might tell me in England in particular that it might be higher. That there are lots of royalists, people who love the royals and are monarchists and love the royal family. And then there are people who are Republicans, right? It's the republic. It's the people. It's the pro. And that's where I stand. I'm not a Republican in the sense of what it's called here in the United States, but in England, I'm pro-Republican in terms of pro the people and the republic, not the monarchy. So there's a big difference, right? And contextualizing that is important. And so there are lots of people who are royalists and monarchists and all, they're very staunch in that way. And then there's lots of people who are much more about the people, the larger society, the what they call it, the republic, if you will. So that's what I mean when I say that I'm pro-republic. I shouldn't even say Republican. But at least what you should do, Jeremy Corbyn, is have a little decency. And obviously, he lacks decency. And I supported I'm a Labour person. I voted for Labour last year. 2019 in that shambolic election that resulted in the worst Labour loss, a landslide victory for the Conservatives over Labour, and the worst defeat for Labour in a general election since 1935. Prince Philip hadn't even attended that funeral in Nazi Germany yet. That would be 2 years before he would, tragically encounter the loss of one of his sisters, one of his Nazi sisters. But I think that, come on. There's certain people that you and I will not miss when they pass away, or have not missed when they passed away. There's certain people that are not going to be missed, right? And we're not going to go on social media and say, oh, I'm so sorry for their passing. You know that, and I know that. There's certain people that we are never going to ever do that with. And we will just let the day pass by and we will not acknowledge them. But I think that when you are in politics, and when you are someone who was the leader of the Labour Party, I think you have to be a little bit more wise than that, don't you? Whether Jeremy Corbyn liked Prince Philip or not, whether Jeremy Corbyn, like myself, has issues with some of the royal family and the way they've treated Meghan Markle, and even before that, their whole history, my God. Please, go read Empire Land by something Sangera, and go read God, there's a load of books I could recommend to you, about the royal family and everything, the ghastliness, to say the least, associated with them and what they did to the African continent. Yeah. But if someone who did have a life of public service, right, and did care about people and did serve his country and did, generally speaking, live a life of service, which Prince Philip did, by the way, and bravely fought for the country. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, in World War II, don't think there's anything wrong with that. Can't fault him, right? So why can't Jeremy Corbyn have the good sense and decency to at least put out a tweet that recognizes Prince Philip's passing? Whether you liked him or not, whether you liked the royal family or not, it's just so insensitive. Come on now. At least acknowledge the man's passing. There's lots of people who are in the everyday public that couldn't give a toss about Prince Philip. And so it's a different thing for them. But even so, have a little decency, Jeremy. That's just, even coming from me saying that, I'm saying have some, even, I shouldn't say it like that, but have some decency, man. Have a good sense, man, to go and just at least tweet it. He finally did. He got shamed into it, did Jeremy Corbyn. He got shamed into it. Someone, he obviously got bumped. He got pilloried. And he sent out a tweet about. I know this is so interesting. I've spent half an hour talking about this now. So I guess there is some kind of feeling I have here that I'm talking about this now for nearly half an hour, which was not in the remit because I did not plan to do that. You know? I mean, President Biden has done it. President Biden's tweeted out something. Prince Philip's legacy will live on not only through his family, but in all the charitable endeavors he shaped. Jill and I are keeping the Queen and Prince Philip's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the people of the United Kingdom in our hearts during this time. So if President Biden can do it here in the United States, if he can tweet out something about Prince Philip, why the heck did it take Jeremy Corbyn? And I'm a Labour Party supporter. But why did it take Jeremy Corbyn hours? That's just, I'm sorry, that's just really, it's not a good look. If you were and look, I know you're an activist, and look, there's some things about Jeremy Corbyn I do like, and there's some things about him that I don't. Like you, there's things that you like about people and things you don't. There's things you probably like about this podcast and things you don't. There's things you like about your family members and things you don't. You know, that's the way of the world, right? That's Earth, Wind and Fire. That's the way of the world. Love that song, by the way. And then finally, Jeremy Corbyn puts out a tweet. And this is the tweet that he put out after he deleted the one where I talked about him tweeting about Bolivia and let's get together and celebrate the left and celebrate 6 months or whatever it was he tweeted out. And here's what, after he deleted that, this is the tweet he put up instead. Losing a loved one, as so many families have this past year, is always heartbreaking. My thoughts are with Prince Philip's family and all who loved him. I'm laughing. Excuse me. This is why I'm laughing. It's such a neutralized, bland tweet. Incidental. In other words, fly me to the moon. In other words. In other words, it's like millions of people lose their lives and Prince Philip's one of them. I'm laughing, but it is really not funny because, this is seriously, right? That's how that tweet sounds. Losing a loved one, as so many families have this past year, is always heartbreaking. My thoughts are with Prince Philip's family and all who loved him. It's like, in other words, I don't love him. I didn't love him. I don't love him. Now look, again. Yeah, I'm sure that there's things about Prince Philip that weren't great, right? But I'm not going to go into that. I've already gone into the connections with the Nazis in his family, not him, but his sisters. I think that's as far as one should even go. Have a little measure of decency here. He passed away today. I do believe that some people don't believe this. It's so interesting because remember when Kobe Bryant was killed, passed away was killed in that horrible helicopter crash just over a year ago. And there was a reporter at, I believe, the Washington Post, and she had questioned literally within an hour of the announcement of Kobe Bryant being killed in that crash, along with his daughter Gianna, and along with, I think it was 7 other people. Yeah, it was 7 other people. Total of 9 people were killed in that helicopter crash. And there was a reporter, I'm not going to mention her name because I don't think it's necessary to do that. She got a lot of heat. By the way, she's the one, she said, well, a day like this is a perfect day to dig into Kobe Bryant's past and the fact that he raped a woman in Colorado. And I criticize Kobe Bryant. I definitely think that happened, by the way. And I know that there are people who would take issue with it, and there was some kind of settlement done in that case. And I think he was arguing at the time, it was consensual. And there was, and the particular woman who worked at a hotel or at a treatment place where Kobe was getting rehabbed, I think, for an injury that he had when he was playing in the NBA with the Lakers at some point. Something happened, and I think he did do this. I do. But Felicia Somnez, oh God, I mentioned her name. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to repeat it. Oh my gosh, that's just ghastly. And I honestly just came out. Remember I talked about that yesterday? The truth comes out. Well, that maybe subconsciously I did want to really reveal her name. Oh, dearie me. God, I have not got off to a good start on this podcast, have I? Not today. Some of you might say you never do get off to a good start. But the bottom line is that the reporter had said, this would be a perfect day. This is literally within an hour of Kobe Bryant being killed in the helicopter crash. This would be a perfect day to re-examine Kobe Bryant in light of the situation in Colorado where he had sexually assaulted a woman. We need to look at that. His reputation may not be. And she got pilloried. Understandably in some ways, because my gosh, the bloodstains hadn't been dried yet. Isn't that ghoulish? Me saying that, but I guess some people found, and here's what happened. I defended. Listen to me. I defended her right to raise the question about Cozy. I told you I'm not getting off to a good start today. I defended her right to raise critical questions about Kobe Bryant. Even as I said, I don't think this is the right time, but what you're saying, we need to look at that. But what many people were saying, just not today. Half an hour after her news that he had died and that 7 other people had died and the eighth person, the other person, his daughter had died and 7 others had died, a total of 9 of them. Maybe not the best time, most people were saying. And I actually agreed with her. I actually agreed that I don't think it was the best time, but I defended her right to do that as a journalist, as a person with the protection of the First Amendment. But she got death threats for that. And I don't think that's necessary. And while I definitely personally would not have done that in that way, I agree with her that, you can raise some real critical questions about Kobe Bryant, for sure. I just don't know if I would have done it half an hour after he passed away. That's all, after he was killed. That's all. And, same thing with Prince Philip. Even though I've taken time to talk about him, and about some of the connections of his family, not him, but his family, to the Nazis. I don't know that, sending out a tweet about Bolivia when you know well that Prince Philip died, and you're a politician, you are a member, you used to be the leader of the Labour Party. Just over a year ago, you were Labour leader. Imagine if Sir Keir Starmer had done that today. People would be calling for him to resign. I'm kidding you not. They'd call for him to stand down as Labour leader. You think I'm joking? Absolutely would. People would be calling for him to stand down. I'm not joking. They would. If Sir Keir Starmer, who is the present Labour leader in the UK, had tweeted out something about Bolivia or about something else, Scotland or I don't know, not Scotland, but some place, and did not even say anything about Prince Philip, not in good taste. I mean, it's what the previous occupant of the White House did, right? When all of these people had died, famous people, politicians, black folk being murdered by the cops, never tweeted anything about it. George Floyd, he barely mentioned anything about George Floyd. And in a speech at the Rose Garden last year, he said, well, George will be very happy about this. George will be looking down and he's very happy about this. And what he was referring to, and yeah, I'm not going to mention his name. You know the orange one. You know who that orange so-and-so is. And he got out in the Rose Garden there and he started talking about some bill. And the bill was injurious, of course, to black and brown folk and gave police all of these sweeping, nasty-ass, fascistic powers and things of that nature. I believe that's what it was. Saying, and you've got Kill the Bill in the UK, and Jeremy Corbyn's very much on the side of getting rid of, so he's on the right side of that. You know, this bill, which is so onerous in England and in Wales, it will effectively end protest as you and I know it, dear listener. I'm not joking. Would curtail it to such a degree to the effect that it's really not there at all. Talking about Nazi Germany, my gosh, talking about fascism and totalitarianism. But anyway, that's what the orange piece of garbage said. Talked about George would be very happy. And that was really, would he be happy about giving the police all these powers and, giving police greater protection after they've murdered one of us? Really? George would be smiling and looking, would he? Point is, George Floyd should still be here. And that's what I want to transition to now. You know, I'm going to leave Jeremy Corbyn now. I think I've worn that subject out. Jeremy Corbyn really embarrasses himself a lot of times. He can be on the right side of things. He has been. I think if you look at his career in general, you will see that politically. But Jeremy Corbyn can be his own worst enemy, I'm telling you. It's embarrassing. The Labour Party, there's always been a struggle in the Labour Party, especially over the last, since the Blair years, even before that, but particularly the Blair years, even before that, though, with Kinnock in the 80s and after Neil Kinnock and all of that, and the issues there that were a big problem with Kinnock. After that, you had, Tony Blair in the 90s and New Labour. And that was a huge problem, Blairism and the globalism and the neoliberalism and the factions in the Labour Party who didn't care for all of that. And now you've got this struggle in the party again. The party went more left under Corbyn, and then there's these struggles in the infrastructure of the party, and there's always this clash between the moderates and the neoliberals and the moderates and the progressives who want to push the party one way, and the neoliberals and the moderate, who want to push it back more center, more to the right, more left. Told you this is not this is such an inauspicious first 38 minutes. 38 minutes. I know. I love mocking the fact that these podcast episodes can be really long, longer than a lot of movies that you get to watch. But anyway, as I'm saying here, because I ranted a lot yesterday, and for good reason. I don't have to justify that, of course, but that had to be said yesterday. So. Now I am back into, I think, well, put it this way, stumbling over my words. I'm back to that now, and having a few more chuckles in the process of that. But yeah, I think, dear, oh dear, oh dear. Anyway, I just want to transition over to this trial. But before I do, there's an election coming up in England, in Wales, and Scotland, and Northern Ireland, all over the UK in less than a month. May the 6th, Thursday, May the 6th, 2021, is the general election. It's a big one. It's a big one. Boris Johnson and the Tories are absolutely floundering, even though polls will say that they still got this lead over Labour. But Labour needs to get their butts back on the shelf and do something here, because with all of the garbage that the Tories are throwing at the wall because the garbage is their own. The Labour Party can't gain traction? Really? With everything. You put out a report that says that there's no institutional racism in the United Kingdom in 2021. You put out a report that says that. Incredible. It's not incredible, though, because this is exactly what you'd expect from a racist country like the United Kingdom, like England, specifically. India. I mean, come on. Really? I mean, that shows you that the society is still racist. Of course it is. The UK. Of course Britain is. Of course the UK is. Of course England. Of course all of the countries in the UK. They're all racist. I mean, come on. For a government agency to put out a report in 2021 that say that that institutionalized racism doesn't exist in the United Kingdom? Good grief. Oh, God. These people are people who believe that the earth is flat. Surely. Oh, my gosh. Dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. And Boris Johnson has not backed away from that report, by the way. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And yet, the heavy-handed police, you got the Metropolitan Police Officer that I think killed Sarah Everard. I know that in England right now, you can't say that because of the libel laws. So you can't say that in England, particularly if you're a member of the press. You are subject to a lawsuit, and it's pretty darn tough if you don't want to be on the side of that because it leans and genuflects to the person who says they've been libeled or slandered. And those laws are serious in England, serious. And the Sun newspaper, that piece of garbage newspaper there in England, has found that out on many an occasion. As have a few other publications, but particularly that one. By the way, as I've said before, the Sun will not set in Merseyside, in Liverpool. You will not be able to get that anywhere in Liverpool, on the whole of Merseyside. You will not find that newspaper. And it's because of what that scurrilous rag wrote about the 96 people who were killed in a crush in Hillsborough at the Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield in England during just prior to the start of a football match in the FA Cup semi-final, Football Association Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. And those Liverpool fans in the Leppings Lane end were crushed into these pens by the South Yorkshire Police? Yeah, or the West Yorkshire. I think it's the South Yorkshire Police. Yeah, Sheffield is in South Yorkshire. To the best of my geographical memory, and I should know this, being from England, born and raised and grew up there. I should know my geography. Yeah, it's in South Wales, South Yorkshire. And if it's not, someone will tell me, and they will email me at politicratpod@gmail.com and tell me. They won't email me and tell me that I got it correct. They will email and tell me that I got it wrong. Because that's when you hear from people, right? When you do something wrong. Because when you do something right, it's expected. That's what you should be doing. So why do you need to hear? This is part of the reason why I'm not scrounging for praise from people. I mean, it's very nice. Again, I don't spit at it. I don't slap it. I don't say, no. I embrace it. That's nice. Thank you. But I'm not someone who, as I've said before to you, dear listener, who does things to get praise. Because if you as a person do things to get praise, that's not going to be a good place. Because that means you're not doing things sincerely. You're doing it to get accolades. You're doing it to get praise. And if you're doing that, you're not going to do your best work. You're not going to be your best self. You're not going to be the person you want to be. And you're going to be pretty darn miserable. Because when that praise stops, when they stop writing the headlines about you, when your pals stop saying things about you, when the fans stop saying things about you, you start to get depressed. You start to not believe because you're relying on an external source for your happiness. And you should never do that. And we all, to an extent, rely on these things in our lives externally to give us a crutch. I'm not talking about drug habits or anything. I'm talking about the comforts, the comfort foods, the comforts in our lives, the accoutrement, the accoutrement, the things around us, the accoutrements that are tactile, or the people around us that we love and care about. Family, spouse, children, special friends, close friends, good people, all of those things, right? We that's part of the support network. So that when somebody praises you in your family, that means a whole lot more, right? Than if Joe Schmo down the street does. Or even if some awards body gives you praise. I mean, you take the praise and you're thankful and you appreciate it and you're happy about that. But when a family member tells you, damn it, yeah, this is really good, or damn it, well, they don't use the word damn, but say, this is really good, well done. That means a lot more because your family's hopefully more honest with you. And they will tell you when you effed up too, by the way. You know that. But if you have family that you have some kind of relationship with and that relationship is positive, you will hear both, right? You'll hear the times when you didn't do well and the times when you did. All of that is to say that praise. Yeah. Gosh, I talk and then I forget what I'm going to go. That comes with getting older, dear listener. Some of you may have experienced this. Some of you are yet to. And don't be frustrated when it happens. I mean, it's frustrating, but I shouldn't tell you how to feel about that. That's not good. I am going to move on here, except to say, don't forget these elections in the UK. Keep your eye on them. I'm going to be keeping my eye on them, especially. And I'll let you know and update you on some of those things. And there are other elections around the world I'll also be doing that with too. It's not just the UK and America. I know it's centered that way, but there are other countries on the globe. There are others. It's not just those two. Anyway, the election is coming. We'll see what Labour can do or not do against the Tories. And let's see if the voters have long memories, because Brexit's a blooming disaster. It's absolutely hampering everything. The EU has definitely got more control here. For those who wanted to take back control, you must admit now you failed. And now Nigel Farage has done a runner. He's nowhere to be seen. I retire from politics. Because he's made his money from Brexit, right? And his work is done here. His lies are done here. So now he's got nowhere to go. But I'm leaving. I'm leaving politics. And by the way, he's going to end up doing this media thing. And Piers Morgan's going to be doing that. And some of these other people that I don't necessarily, I don't like. I mean, Piers Morgan, again, after what he said about, I still follow the guy on Twitter. There's some things about Piers I kind of have a laugh with, and I think, but he's mediocre. And some people might say that about me. I'm not, but I listen, we all have limitations. I've got limitations. And so does he. He's not this special wonderkind. He's making a whole lot more money than I am. Good for him. I'm not envious of him. Envy no man, his grand possessions. That is one of the 10 commandments of success by Dr. Benjamin Mays. He mentored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., both Morehouse men. But I don't envy any of these folks. I don't envy any. Really? No. Why? Why would I envy? But again, this is the thing. Piers Morgan, and that's a whole nother thing. We hear his involvement with News of the World and all of that, and the scandal there with the taping celebrities and the wiretapping and all this other stuff, and Rebecca Brooks, I believe her name is, or all of that other stuff that was going on there. Oh dear, it's a whole nother episode. But anyway, I'll be looking out for this election coming up. It's only another month away, less than. Whereas here in the US, we've got like 2 years before an election. When it's the presidency, right? If you're running for the top office in the land here, it's a really long election slog. It's 2 years. It should never be that long. It should be 6 months max. And in England, in the UK in general, it's 6 weeks. It's literally 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks, or 6 weeks. It was only 2 weeks ago that the election campaign began, like 2.5 weeks ago. It's like 6 weeks. That's what it should be in America, in the US of A. But I know it's a bigger country, I get it. But okay then, so if it shouldn't be 6 weeks, make it 6 months max. I mean, in Canada, I think it's, 3 months? It's 3 months or so in Canada, I think. Someone in Canada listening can correct me if I am wrong. It's about 3 months. 3 months, 4 months or so. I don't remember exactly. But it's not a whole year. And it's not 2 years like it is here for the presidency. 2 years. Joe Biden, when he ran, he announced his run in 2019, April of that year. 2019. And now we're almost 2 years after that. So it's not quite 2 years, but it's practically 2 years. Some people announced earlier than that. Elizabeth Warren, the senator out of Massachusetts, she announced in January of 2019. January of 2019. Whew. I mean, you've got to put your infrastructure up and this and that and the other. I mean, they're planning this before that because they've got to have all these offices open all around the country. It's a big country, this one is. 332 or so. 333 million people. Or thereabouts. And, lest I go much longer here on this episode, I'm going to change gears to this trial. I promise you. That's coming up right after this.
As a forensic pathologist, that's one of the things we look at and learn about is when we see this type of injury, we associate that with this type of event.
That was forensic pathologist Dr. Lindsay Thomas testifying today on this day 10 of the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, the defendant in this trial. Now look, the prosecution, I'm trying to talk here. The prosecution is having a much better week. And for all of my doubts about this case, and I've gone ad infinitum about it, I won't go any further. You know, if you listen here regularly, dear listener, that I have said what I've said about where I think this case is going to ultimately go and what I think the verdict's going to be. So I'm not going to go over that again. I think it's well established here on this podcast. I really would like to know what you think about where you think this will go. I'll put up a poll again. Did one a few days back on Twitter at the Popcorn REEL. I'm also actually the actual podcast Twitter handle is at the _Politicrat. There's not a lot posted there. I'll post there once in a while. But the actual show, and I'm going to actually ramp that up and post more there because you really should, right? For the podcast. So on Twitter, if you want to follow the show, the Politicrat Daily Podcast itself, I should say, you can go to Twitter and go to at the _ POLITICRAT. At the _ Politicrat. I do think that the prosecution in this murder trial are having a much better week. it started to crescendo now. And I think one of the reasons why is that the witnesses now that the state, the prosecution, the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, right? And the Minnesota Assistant Attorneys General, who are prosecuting this case, the reason why I think the case they are doing much better this week is because the witnesses they are putting up are, I shouldn't say it like this because then I'm implying that it's the witnesses that are the problem. No, it's not. I don't think the prosecution was very comfortable questioning the witnesses last week, and the witnesses were laypersons, mostly. The witnesses were people on the scene who actually were standing 5 feet away, 5 to 10 feet away from this murderer torturing and executing and lynching George Floyd. They were literally... The prosecution did not look comfortable last week. They just didn't. And it's just inexplicable to me because these prosecutors have prosecuted 1 million cases and they've spoken to laypersons, they've deposed laypersons, they've questioned them on the witness stand. I don't know why, but the prosecution last week looked uncomfortable, didn't look organized, didn't seem to have the phrasing of their questions correct. Is it because they're nervous and they know that millions of people are watching them around the world? I don't know that that should be the reason why. They're seasoned veteran prosecutors. What would that matter? I mean, if you're doing a podcast and you knew that you were being watched live by millions of people around the world, would you be nervous? I mean, on some level you probably would be, but you just do what you normally do. So it wouldn't be a thing to you, would it? I'm not trying to make excuses or make justifications for these prosecutors, but you know what I said about them last week. I thought they were dreadful. The defense attorney's frightful. And I think that he had one day last week, or maybe 2 last week, certainly one day last week, where I think he came out well or better only because the prosecution was so bad, not because he was any great shakes, because he wasn't and still isn't. But the witnesses last week, they all saw, most of these witnesses were all laypersons, and they were on the sidewalk standing 5 or 10 feet away from Derek Chauvin, the murderer, murdering, executing, lynching George Floyd on the ground. The gentleman had handcuffs on behind his back. And so I don't know why the prosecutors would look so disorganized and seem so disorganized last week, and they couldn't phrase their questions correctly, and you had at least 2 of them calling the defendant Mr. Chauvin. That to me, and that's where my doubts came about this case. And even before that, the stuff with this person taking photos in the courtroom while there's a court session going on during the trial, and that was so weird how that was dealt with, and you're telling her to delete the photo and then you don't supervise that, so you don't know for a fact that she's deleted it and removed it from everywhere. So the jury you caught, you probably took a picture of the jury in that courtroom. So, this is the thing that, anyway, so this is the thing. So the prosecution looked really discombobulated last week. This week, it's a different story. The prosecution have actually begun their case. I mean, last week they began it, don't get me wrong. This week, they are playing for keeps. Now, that does not mean I'm changing my outlook, because I still am not changing my outlook. Not yet. But I can say that the prosecution, in my humble opinion, dear listener, is having a much better week. Their high point was yesterday, Thursday, April the 8th, 2021, when they had a very formidable witness, I think the best witness so far in this trial. One Dr. Martin Tobin. I think he's from Ireland somewhere, or maybe from somewhere in Eastern Europe. I think his accent and his last name suggest Ireland. Suggest Ireland. I think he may have background in Ireland somewhere. And he was very good. Very, very good. Very good. He had the defendant's attorney, Eric Nelson, stammering and coughing and had to drink water a few times. He couldn't get his words out. He was stumbling over his words. You think I'm bad today, stumbling over some of my words? Eric Nelson yesterday, I mean, this witness, Dr. Martin Tobin, had Eric Nelson gasping for what? I mean, excuse my referencing of gasping, but had him reaching for water. Oh, I've got to drink something. Must be your accent. This is what Eric Nelson's saying. And I know he was being facetious, but my gosh, he was nervous yesterday. Eric Nelson was nervous as a defense attorney. I think one of the reasons is not just because of Dr. Martin Tobin, who was really good, presented some really strong evidence about the fact that the injuries suffered by George Floyd were caused by asphyxiation, not by any drugs, not by anything else. And I think we all kind of know that, right? We're not all doctors. We're not all, coroners or, but we do know it. Come on. And Eric Nelson is telling everybody, oh no, it was this bit of fentanyl he had, or it was this, it was that, it was the other. Then the prosecution knocked all of that down yesterday. And man, when you had Tobin on there and you had the couple other people on there, they just absolutely slaughtered the defense yesterday. And that to me is the first time in all of this trial, it took till day number 9 yesterday for the prosecution to really bear its fangs. They were good yesterday. They were very good yesterday. They were passionate. I wanted a bit more passion. I got it from them. I think Jerry Blackwell was very good. I would say Erin Eldridge, who I've criticized here, I thought she was a little bit better. Again, I don't think any of these attorneys, any of them, whether it's the defendant's attorney, whether it's any of the assistant attorneys general on the prosecution side, I don't think any of them are great shakes. But I will say, I think they raised their game a little bit yesterday. And they had a very good day. So I'm here to tell you, dear listener, that I have something positive to say about the prosecution for twice. So they had a really good day yesterday. Again, the question always to me, because look, when you've got Eric Nelson stuttering and stammering like I'm not going to curse today. I did a lot of that yesterday. I'm going to withdraw. I'll withdraw, Your Honor. I'll withdraw that. But Eric Nelson was stammering like it was bad. And then when they released the jury for a break or recess, I'm going to play this audio. He was complaining to the Judge Peter Cahill, in the Hennepin County Courthouse. He was complaining, was Eric Nelson. Oh, the exhibits, we only got this in PDF, and he was rattled yesterday, the defense attorney. The defendant's attorney was rattled. It's amazing.
There's a lot of moving parts. I don't think I think you can just acknowledge that this is what you received, without showing it again, that you received an earlier version. It's been updated.
And that's fine, Your Honor. I mean, part of the problem that we're experiencing here is I'm getting these things in many of these items in PDF format, right? Some of them I'm getting electronically there's so many people involved here that I'm getting things in different formats. So if I can have a second to speak with Ms. Voss.
Yeah, I guess it just seems like there's a good faith passing in the night of different versions, and nobody should be criticized. Or, again, let's just tell the jury this is the latest one and this is what it is.
And that's perfectly fine, Your Honor, and I am happy to provide an extra copy. We are happy to provide and republish the slides that were presented to the jury, but I do want to make sure that we're not showing the jury inaccurate information. That's all.
He was rattled there. Ooh, rattled. And I'm not talking you two rattle and hum. I'm talking this guy was rattled. Totally rattled. Not the album by U2, Rattle and Hum, which actually was a really good album. That's back in the, I think it's 1980s now, wasn't it? Or the early 1980s, I think. That's the album that had the song Desire on it, and I think Angel of Harlem, which was about Billie Holiday. Angel of Harlem. That was, I'm not going to do it the way Bono does it because, I don't have that kind of voice. My voice is a bit deeper than that. But that's my approximation of the song. I might even play that coming up. But Eric Nelson was rattled yesterday. And when you've got a defense attorney rattled, and one of your witnesses, who I think now has eclipsed Donald Williams as the most compelling witness I've seen in this trial. I've been watching the trial. I've been watching and, doing my work, flicking over my shoulder, looking at the TV, and back and forth. And I got to tell you, I thought Donald Williams was very good last week, and there were other witnesses last week. I thought, of course, Courtney Cox, as look, she loved George Floyd. She had a romantic relationship with him. She was his girlfriend, and was very compelling. As was, I think, to an extent, Genevieve Hanson. But my issue I told you about Genevieve Hanson was that she was getting into it with the defense attorney, and I'm sorry, and then with the judge, with the jury released back to the chambers, back to the jury room. And it's like, no, you don't do that. You just don't. You don't do that. Even though she has lots of expertise as a firefighter, and she was there, she was standing there, video recording everything, and was telling Chauvin, that murdering you-know-what, to check for a pulse, and he just didn't. He just looked blankly and kept doing what he was doing. Kept murdering, just continued to lynch this man, this young brother who didn't do anything. Just there. And anyway, I'm going to call because you have the $20 bill that looks suspect. Therefore, you deliberately did this, and I'm going to... It's really painful, isn't it? And I'm not a member of George Floyd's family. Seeing that video over and over again, and then the close-ups, and then the stills, and then it all hits you, doesn't it? You can't be calling yourself human if you don't feel something when you see that video, or the stills, and then the graphic nature of what happened, and then the descriptions by Dr. Martin Tobin yesterday, and then the scientific and the medical, and all the names that you can't pronounce and the words that he says. And if you're not a doctor, and I'm not a doctor, I know doctors though, a couple of doctor friends and things, and you listen. And it's just, and you're feeling so sick inside, You're feeling so sick inside. And then you realize that Martin Tobin he must have done something in that jury. That jury must have come away from that, feeling something. Doesn't mean that they're going to, anyway, I don't want to go down that road again. Because, the answer is, what is the jury going to do? And I told you what I said about the jury yesterday and about the white jurors on that jury. And do they see black people as human beings or not? Because you wouldn't treat a dog the way that Derek Chauvin treated George Floyd. You wouldn't. And none of those jurors would. None of the black jurors, none of the mixed race jurors, as they're called, mixed race, multiracial. None of those jurors would have done. None of the white jurors would. Nobody would treat a dog like that. And that's what I mean. Do these jurors, and especially the white jurors, specifically the white jurors, do they view George Floyd as a human being? But I mean my actual question is, as I've said before, do they view black people as human beings? Because then that's already imputed to George Floyd. If they do, then that's going to help. And maybe even if they do, they may still say, well, you know what I think they're going to say in the trial. But it helps if they're not racist, and it helps if they are not people who somehow view black people as less than white people, or as less than anything, or as less than a dog. I mean, we're in a country right now. I'm in a country right now, and there are other countries that have seen this too, where you had signs that said no dogs, Jewish people or black people allowed, or no dogs, blacks or Irish allowed, or no dogs, shirtless or black people allowed, or no dogs, Jewish people. I mean, that's what some of these signs would say all over this country and all over other countries, especially if you're talking about no dogs, no Jewish people, all over Europe and all over Nazi Germany. Come on now. And France, don't get me started about France. How I talked about Jeremy Corbyn earlier. How anti-Semitic is France? A little bit of a not so open, not so closed secret. But anyway, listen to me. As I segue back here. Eric Nelson was hammered yesterday. But we'll see how the prosecution does. We will see. I will be reviewing this day, of course, as well, as we have a parade of forensic pathologists and doctors and people who are, coroners or medical examiners, and who really get into the science and the medicine and how these injuries happen. Because Eric Nelson is BSing you all and telling you that it was his superhuman strength. It was those drugs. It was that COVID. It was this. It was that. It was his heart disease. It was that. It was the lollipop he sucked on, the last thing he did before. I mean, you know what I mean? That's what Eric Nelson is telling you. He's trying to, again, push that kind of bullcrap and the racism and the inference about someone who is black is that somehow we are this or that. And wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's what Eric Nelson's doing. That's what he's been doing since day one. We're now on day 10 of this trial. But the prosecution is finding its sea legs so far this week. I think they really gained steam yesterday, Thursday, April the 8th. And I definitely think that they are on a roll this week. And if they can finish out the week with a flourish, and I hope they have, I hope they did. I've not looked at everything today, but I will be reviewing it all. And I got to tell you, I really do hope they do. You want to end the weekend strong with a jury, and then they've got the weekend to think about it all, and then they come back on Monday. And don't get me wrong, they're not supposed to discuss this case, even amongst themselves right now. You have to understand something, dear listener. If you're not familiar with trial protocol here in the United States, and I don't quite remember what it is for England now, it's been such a long time, but the jurors right now understand something. They cannot even talk to each other about this case. Why? Because the case has not yet reached deliberation. The deliberation phase has not yet happened. And once we get to the end of the prosecution case and then the end of the defense case, because I'm sure the defense is going to present some kind of case, and then we get to the jury charge, and that means the judge is charging the jury of how they're supposed to deliberate vis-a-vis this count, vis-a-vis that count, vis-a-vis because the defendant is charged with 3 different counts. One of them is second degree unintentional, as I've told you. The other one is is one with depraved indifference. And I think the third degree one is also depraved indifference as well, or something like that. I have to get you the exact count, and I will. I will put that actually in the newsletter as well, so that you know, because I don't know that everybody knows this. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who do, But I certainly am not 100% clear. So I need to get that in order, and I need to be able to also send that information to you so that you are clear as well, or you can look it up, but you've got lots of things to do, as have I. But I do want to do this because it's important. We know what we're all talking about here, so that we're not all talking on different pages. So those jury charges will be given by the judge. He will read out from the charging sheet, from the charging book, from the, for the case, for Hennepin County. And after that, when the judge, Peter Cahill, sends that jury into that deliberation room, whenever that's going to be, the next 2 or 3 weeks from now, whether it's going to be 2 weeks from now, whether it's going to be, it's not going to be next week, but whether it's going to be in a couple of weeks, whether it's going to be at the end of April or the beginning of May, I have a feeling it's going to be May, because we're going to get very close to the 1 year mark of the lynching of George Floyd. And I'm telling you, by the time we get to that 1 year mark, we're going to have some kind of verdict here. That's what I think is going to happen. And we don't know how long that jury is going to end up deliberating. It could be a day. It could be a week. It could be a month. There isn't any time limit to the deliberation, including on the daily basis. It could be 12 hours. It could be 8. It could be, and then, they have to deliberate until they get to a verdict, Hours. And then the judge says, no, keep going. Judge has the power to do that. So it's only when the deliberations start, dear listener, that these jurors can finally talk about this case to each other. You imagine you're sitting next to your juror, if you've sat on a jury for a protracted period of time, not just a day or two, but a protracted period. And you've sat on a jury. I've sat on a jury for a protracted period of time. Protracted meaning more than 2 or 3 days. I've been on a jury. The longest, I think, was 2 or 3 weeks in this murder case that I've talked about before. And imagine you're sitting there now, as this jury has, for 10 days. And you've not been allowed to say a single thing about this case. You're taking in all of these exhibits, all of this evidence, all of the video and the testimony, but you can't say a word to your next door juror. Not a word to any of the jurors, not even to the alternates, the 2 alternates that are sitting there. You can't say a word. And that goes on for weeks and months, such as in the O.J. Simpson case, which was over a year long. And they couldn't say a word until it got to the deliberations for a whole year. They had to come in and say, have the small talk and the fake talk and the how's the weather and all that kind of thing. And they couldn't say a word about the case. You cannot talk about the case on the jury until the deliberation phase. And the judge reminds them of that daily. In fact, if you have been watching this trial, you will hear and you will have heard Judge Peter Cahill of the Hennepin County Courthouse in Minneapolis telling the jurors before he releases them, remember, you're not supposed to talk about the case. You're not to discuss this case. You're not to talk about it even amongst yourselves. You're not to watch the news. He says every day he says this. I think before and after. Before the beginning and I think after it. Certainly at the end of the day when he releases them for the day. So they're not supposed to know. All they have is the notepad and pen. And they write anything about this trial on that notepad. But they cannot share that with any. They can't even show that notepad, quite frankly, to their next door juror. There is no discussion. And discussion means including showing someone their notes. I think that's included too. Even though that's more of a communication than an actual discussion or conversation. You're not supposed to communicate to your fellow juror or any juror about the case while it is being tried. The jurors are the triers of fact. The jurors are the ones who assess the facts given to them. They either regard them or they disregard them. As I told you a few days ago, dear listener, a jury is not, once they deliberate, They are not required to consider any of the evidence presented, including that video. I kid you not. That was one of the charges that I remember well in New York when I was sat on that jury. The judge said very clearly, you may regard during your deliberations any or all of the evidence, or you may exclude all the evidence. To reach your, really. The evidence. You can't disregard the facts, but you can disregard the evidence. Because the jury is the trier of facts, so they have a responsibility. That's their role. The judge is the trier of the law, if you will, for lack of a better word. He is the person who procedurally, he or she, or they, pardon me, is in charge of the procedure of the way that the trial unfolds. So as facts are presented through witness testimony and through exhibits, the judge's role is to be the trier of law. What comes in, what doesn't come in. The judge either sustains or overrules the objections to evidence or to a line of questioning. I think that most of you, all of you listening to me right now, those of you listening know this already. But I do want to just say it again. Maybe some people aren't familiar with that or weren't aware of that. But the judge is the trier of the law. The judge's role, if you will, trier of the law is probably more of a tricky word and maybe not the right legal term of art. So I should be careful with how I phrase that myself. But the judge's responsibility is to make sure that the officers of the court, who are the attorneys, not the court officers, the court security. I'm talking about the officers of the court, the attorneys presenting the case, that they are doing so in a way that does not offend the court and does not offend jurisprudence, if you will. Jurisprudence is actually another term of art legally that I really shouldn't use because it's a little bit different. That does not affect the evidentiary processes of trial. You have to be able to, as a judge, make sure that the trial is proceeding within the bounds of the rules of the law in the court. That's what the judge is there for. And the judge is supposed to be impartial. Oh dear. Tell that to the exonerated five about how impartial that judge was. Thomas Galligan. Oh dear. He was known as Galligan's Island. Rikers Island was known as Galligan's Island because Thomas Galligan, I don't know if he's still alive or not, he was one of the judges in the Central Park in the exonerated five cases. I watched him. I was in the courtroom watching him, and he was a you-know-what. I mean, he was awful. And Galligan's Island was the nickname given to Rikers Island in New York because that judge, under his watch, had sent more people, black and brown, to prison than any other judge in the New York court system, in the criminal court system. I kid you not. They called that Rikers Island, they nicknamed it Galligan's Island. Thomas Galligan. I kid you not. A take on Gilligan's Island. Yeah, of course. But Galligan's Island was what Rikers Island was nicknamed as. Because this judge was a totally pro-prosecution judge, which is why I chuckled when I said a judge is supposed to be impartial. And the judge in Los Angeles, and I've not talked about this, so let me do that now. Latasha Hollins, who 30 years ago and 1 month ago or so was killed, assassinated by a Korean grocery store clerk. Literally. I mean, one shot to the back of the head of a 15-year-old. 15-year-old girl. Black girl named Latasha Hollins in Watts in Los Angeles. I think there's a Netflix documentary called In Praise of Latasha or For Love of Latasha. I'll put that in the newsletter. Please subscribe to this newsletter. please, politicrat.substack.com. You'll get the letter sent to you via email when it's released on a daily basis too. And it's not this long newsletter packed with things. You get newsletters sometimes and there's so much in there and you never even get to finish doing everything, reading everything. My newsletters, the newsletters for this daily podcast are not like that. And they are easy to digest, easy to read. The print is fairly easy to read. It's, it's spaced out. There's not a billion things on there. Your eyeballs are crossing, looking at everything. It's a really nice format, and I think you'll agree. But this documentary, and you got to watch this. And Latasha Hollins, oh dear, she should still be here. It's another, and the judge in that case is the point I want to make. Collins, I believe. Judge Joyce Collins, I believe her last name is, who said that the woman who assassinated Latasha Hollins had, quote, suffered enough already. And so therefore, even though a jury found her guilty of homicide and first-degree murder or whatever the charges were, it was charges stiffer and stronger than the charges that Derek Chauvin's facing. The store camera recorded the assassination. And the jury saw all of that. And the jury said, yep, guilty as sin. Latasha Hollins put her book bag on the counter, put the orange juice she was accused of stealing on the counter, walked away from the store, walked out the store. And as she was walking away from the counter and leaving the store, the Korean grocer, she pulled out her gun, shot her in the back of the head, less than 3 feet away. It was literally 2 feet from her. It was point blank. I've seen it. It's awful. It's traumatizing. And the jury said in Los Angeles, guilty as sin. And the judge said, no, the Korean grocer, she suffered enough. She didn't spend a day in jail, not one. And she spent a few hours doing community service. That was it. And that was one of the things that led up to the uprising the following year. And then the Rodney King acquittals of these 4 cops, these 4 white cops in Los Angeles, who we all saw beat the living daylights out of Rodney King. Taser him, beat him, treat him like he was a hog, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot. That's Patrick Henry, I think. Give me liberty or give me death. I think that's Patrick Henry. But no, they didn't do anything. They were beating an animal. And that's how that's why I go back to why I think this is going to be huge, whether these white jurors have that mentality, that racist mentality that says that they don't view black people as human beings. Because the culture and the society has been saying that to them and to you and to us, to me, for hundreds of years, or 100 years plus now. And that gets internalized. But I'm not suggesting that, maybe these people were independently racist before that anyway. And their families. I don't know if they are or not. I have no idea if they're racist or not. I'm just posing that question and that very real issue. I went into that yesterday, of course. So, we'll see what happens. But this, I'm telling you, and Minnesota has had a long history. Minneapolis has had a long history of these police, these killer cops doing all these things to black people. There's so many cases. There was one a few years before that of these 2 cops and this young black man, probably 20, 18, 19. They shot him to death and he was handcuffed. I believe he was handcuffed. Shot him to death. Oh, he went for the gun. How could he go for your gun if he's got handcuffs on? How successful would that be? Or he had a struggle, or he had one handcuff on and They struggled and boom, boom, boom. Shot him a million times. Shot him at least 8 times, if not more. Jesus Christ. It's just, anyway. So there's the great documentary. And I spoke to these 2 fine gentlemen who did the documentary Tina on HBO. I spoke to them 2 Fridays ago. And they also directed LA 92, which is available on National Geographic on demand if you have certain cable systems. I think Comcast is definitely one of them. And there are others, but probably it's on YouTube maybe too. You got to watch LA 92. Really powerful stuff. If you're in the frame of mind to want to watch it, because it's intense stuff. But hey, right? You should watch this. I mean, I know that this trial is very traumatizing, but, again, we've got to see these things. We can't look away. We can't look away. And that's the problem America has. We've looked away so much. And we know it's there. But just because we look away, it doesn't mean it's going away. So it gets worse and worse when you look away, by the way. So you really, anyway, you get the idea. You really need to pay attention to this trial. Prosecution has had a much stronger week. And the defense has just absolutely crumbled this week, especially yesterday. Because now because it's one thing to look at witnesses who are understandably traumatized and outraged by these killer cops, the 4 of them, with one of them being the ringleader in chief, putting his neck on the knee of George Floyd and posing for pictures and just staring at the video that's being recorded. And I'm waiting for him to put up his 2 arms and do a flex pose, like he's a wrestler or something. Seriously, I'm waiting for that. With those silly, stupid sunglasses on his head. You know what I think about them and what I think about him. We'll see. We shall see what happens here. But this definitely was, you're bringing the full evidence. It's one thing to have the emotion of last week, understandably. Now you've got the cold, hard science. Just breaking down the cold, hard stuff that's going on. Windpipe crushed. He couldn't breathe. He's jammed in the concrete. And this is what it does to the body. This is what it does to the larynx and the trachea and and it's so cold and dispassionate. And yeah, it's disturbing. Because they're just coldly just breaking it down. And they're telling you that that's what happened to this young man. No family now. His family has no father. His family has lost a brother. A relative lost. Remember George Floyd's last words. Basically, were, I love you, Mama. I love you, Mama. Tell the kids I love them. I am going to record extras for the newsletter. That's what I'm going to do. You'll hear some audio on the newsletter coming up later on. And I'm going to do that. So I'm going to leave it right there. I really will. And I hope that you are doing as well as you can in these times. And I really urge you to get vaccinated, please. Please. I know that people have fear of needles. I know people have fear of this, fear of that, fear of the other. And there's a lot of skepticism, understandably so, because of the way we have been treated by the United States government, by other governments, by the medical profession, which does not see us as equals, does not see us as human beings. A pain threshold. Oh, you don't feel any pain. Black person, black woman, you don't feel pain. I have lots to say, by the way. So you really will want to listen to the audio extras edition of this podcast in the newsletter today, tonight's newsletter, that you will receive if you subscribe. So please do subscribe at politicrat.substack.com. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.